Okay, so I'm going to set the screen share. Oh, very good. So we begin with our opening prayer. So if you have your books, please refer to your books. And if you want to use the screen share that I've got here, that's fine. And at the end of the opening prayers, then we can, if anybody has any thoughts, we can discuss them. So now we recite the altruistic motivation, twice in English, once in Tibet. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious Buddhahood. Dagla dangwa je pe jwa no pa je pe geg. Tarpa dang tam she ken pe bar du jo par je pa tam she ki so je pe. Manam ka dam yam pe sem chen tam she de wa dang den. Dug now dang drel nor du la na me pa yang dag pa zog pe zhang ju brin po she to pa ja. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Deshe du sang ma ge gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Ma she bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Tu de ring ne song te ni ma sang ta sam gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Short refuge prayer. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki chonam la. Zhangzhu Baidu Dagni Kapsuchi Dagi Jinso Ki Pe Sonamgi Chola Penshir Sangye Jupasho. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pesem centam she dewadang dewe gurdang dempar Dug now dang dunel gi gudang dwell war Dug now me pe de wa dang mi dwell war Nay ring chak dang ni dang dwell way dang nam la ne pa Thank you. Does anybody have any comments, any questions, or anything that pertains to what we've been talking about in the past weeks? Okay. So what we've been talking about is we've been talking about the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. So these are the first few chapters of the Jewel Ornamental Liberation is dealing with the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. So to refresh our memory, we'll go and we'll recite the four thoughts, and then we'll continue our discussion about them. So let me see here. Okay, so everybody recite this out loud, please. Follow along. The freedoms and advantages, so extremely difficult to obtain, accomplish the purpose of human life. If one does not achieve benefit from this now, how could this opportunity come again? Ho, this kind of leisure and endowment is supremely difficult to obtain. When one obtains the body, which is easily lost, do not waste it meaninglessly, but rather use it to attain ultimate liberation, joyous result. So please contemplate a moment. If you recall, here are the 8 leisures. So you can read these on the screen, or maybe you have it on your text that you might have in front of you. Contemplate precious human life, that we have a precious human body. By virtue of the fact that we are here together, we are good people. We have many opportunities that most people around the world do not have. And we need to seize this opportunity to help other beings. These are the 10 enrichments, the 10 endowments of being a human being. Contemplate these. We return to the second part of the prayer. Impermanence. This is 2 pages. Ka, no matter what has been done, nothing benefits at the time of death. Worldly activities, yes, they are lies. Ka, the 8 worldly dharmas are like a painted rainbow. Think you can put your trust in them? In the certainty of death and knowing that nothing remains long, quickly accomplish liberation. Impermanence makes departure certain, like the shadow of the setting sun. Abandoning laziness and indifference, blaze like fire in fierce diligence. This life is impermanent, like clouds in the autumn sky. Birth and death migrators are the same as actors in a play or a dance. The life of beings is like lightning in the sky, like water falling from a steep mountain cliff. It departs quickly, quickly. The nature of all phenomena is impermanence. Death is a certainty to all who are born. Death can descend any time like a drop of morning dew on a blade of grass. Quick, it is time to make effort for the essence of the Dharma. Take a moment, read this quietly to yourself, contemplate the meaning of impermanence. We'll go back to the first page here. The third part of the prayer is the suffering of samsara. Consider the suffering of beings in the 6 realms of samsara. Doing so, great fear and dread arise in the heart. In the 3 lower realms, and even in the 3 higher ones, there is not an instant of absolute happiness. I will avoid the root cause of my samsaric existence and practice the excellent path of peace to enlightenment. Read this quietly to yourself and contemplate the meaning of this. The suffering of samsara. The fourth part of the prayer is karma, cause, and result. Even if one were a king at the time of death, one's possessions, enjoyments, friends, and retinue will not follow. But wherever that sentient being goes, his karma follows after him like a shadow. The fruit of one's positive karma is happiness. Suffering is the fruit of negative karma. The inexorable karmic causation is the mode of abiding in all dharmas. Henceforth, practice the Dharma by distinguishing between what should be practiced and what should be given up. Contemplate the meaning of karma, cause and result. Okay, thank you. So these are the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma, the preliminary foundation awakenings, the four common preliminaries that all the Buddha practitioners, wherever they are, whatever uh, tradition they are following, whether it's the Hinayana, the Mahayana, the Vajrayana, all recite and use these four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma as a reminder that we are human beings, that we are impermanent human beings, that we are living in an ocean of suffering, and that we have caused this ocean of suffering through our own actions. We brought this on ourselves, talking collectively as human beings, and we ultimately can liberate ourselves from this suffering. But in order to do that, we need to really understand what it is that we are suffering from, why it is that we are suffering, and how it is that we can liberate ourselves. So we need to have this structure in order to help ourselves to be able to um, cure ourselves of this sorrow, of this confusion, of doing further harm to ourselves and to others. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we continue the conversation with impermanence? Okay. I hope you're taking notes. And last week we talked about the precious human life. So this week we're going to talk about the impermanence. So it says here, Ka, no matter what has been done, nothing benefits at the time of death. Worldly activities, yes, they are lies. Ka, the eight worldly dharmas are like a painted rainbow. Think you can put your trust in them? So, Ka is just an expression of here it is. No matter what has been done, nothing benefits at the time of death. So we can say that no matter who we are, that when we die, whatever we have done is going to lead us, is like a wind that is blowing a leaf in the air, is whatever we have done is going to blow that leaf, is going to blow our life, our spirituality in a certain direction. And if we have not been able to learn how to control those winds, those vicissitudes of our lives, our very being of that leaf, then we are just meant to be wandering and not be in control of what it is that we're doing. So it says worldly activities, yes, they are lies. Ka, the eight worldly dharmas are like a painted rainbow. Think you can put your trust in them. So worldly activities. So what is it that we are doing that is causing these karmic winds to blow us in directions that are not wholesome, that are not pure, that are not lead us to happiness? What are these eight worldly activities? We need to understand them. So the eight worldly activities, or the eight worldly concerns, or the eight worldly dharmas. This is dharmas with a lowercase d, because dharma means a pathway. A concern is something that we are mentally connected with, that we're thinking about. The eight worldly dharmas, the eight worldly concerns, the eight worldly activities. What is it that we are involved with that is leading us into unwholesome ways and unwholesome results? So we can see that these are four pairs. There's gain and loss. There's pleasure and pain. There's praise and blame. And there's fame and disgrace. So how much time do we think about gain and loss? When you're watching television, when you're reading a book, when you're walking around the streets, when you're at work, when you're with your family, when you're talking to your financial advisor, when you're looking at your monthly bank statements, what are we thinking about? Are we thinking about lofty things, or are we thinking about, wow, my reports and my financial statement looked really good a couple of years ago, but now they're starting to look really bad, and I'm really worried about it. How much time do you think about that? Do you think about, well, maybe I need to reallocate funds. I need to rebalance my account. And how much loss can I suffer before I bail out of the whole thing altogether? How much time am I thinking about this? So whether it's financial gain and financial loss, or it's loss in power, it's loss in respect, or gain in respect, things that I'm doing in the family. Oh, I'm about to get married. I'm about to have a child. I'm about to move from here to another house or something like that. What kind of what am I going to gain out of that? What respect am I going to gain out of that? Or what am I going to lose out of that in terms of that kind of respect by moving to another location? How much time do we think about our gain and our loss? So it's something to contemplate. It's something that we need to understand, because I know that we all spend more time thinking about mundane things than we think about doing spiritual things. So we need to be able to understand the mundane things, so we know how to deal with them, to at least compartmentalize those thoughts while we are developing strength in our spiritual thoughts. Pleasure and pain. How much time do we think about, our family that we receive pleasure from, that our possessions, that maybe we receive some kind of pleasure from those material things? How much time do we think about that? How much time do we think about, going out and playing sports or watching sports and doing all the different things that we do? But then how those pleasures invariably turn into pain. Whether it's like sports and we hurt ourselves, and now we have to go through that injury, from something that we were getting great pleasure from, or maybe it's a great relationship, a love relationship with someone, and in the beginning it's full of pleasure and excitement and so on, and passion, but then after a period of time it shifts, it turns away, we get older. Things happen. Our attention wanders to other people, or maybe our spouse, their attention wanders to somebody else, and now we have to go through the pain of the loss of that pleasure. So how much time do we think about pleasure and pain? And I think that when we're younger, we think a lot more about it in terms of our pleasures and the enjoyment of those pleasures. As we get older, I think we begin to think more about the pain of our physical body and how that is changing, where our physical body used to bring us great joy and happiness. Now we don't perform in the same ways that we used to, and anything that we try to do results in some kind of injury, some kind of pain, some kind of difficulty. And we can see how our life is changing, how we're getting older. We go through birth, old age, sickness, and death. So we see these 8 worldly concerns that this is what we're thinking about: praise and blame. The praise that we might receive from our families, or the praise that we might receive from work or from school, um, that we're doing a good job, that other people are proud of us and are happy for what we do, and maybe we've contributed something really special at work and has brought in a lot of money, a new account or something like that, or we found a more efficient way to do things in our jobs, and we received a great deal of praise for that. But then that can settle in, and then all of a sudden something happens where we or somebody else loses an account, or begins to create a problem in the workforce, and we become blameworthy for having disturbed what was a nice balance. Everybody was happy, everybody was working hard, everybody was reaping the benefits, but now we're being blamed for this slowdown in business, slowdown in understanding what it is that we're trying to do. Maybe it's praise in our spirituality, it's praise for our accomplishments in being able to do practice or something, and now things aren't going really well. Maybe you're losing your temper or something. You're running out of time to be able to do all the things you want to do, and you begin to blame your spirituality for these things. Or somebody says to you, "Wow, you just lost your temper. You just really got on. I thought you were I thought you were a Buddhist, and Buddhists don't do that." And they're blaming you now for making them feel bad, or causing Buddhism to be as ordinary as anything else, that it's not special anymore. So either we're being praised or we're being blamed. So how much time do we think about that? And how much does the praise and the blame motivate us to do things or not to do things? Does it create a fear in us? If I don't do these things, am I going to be blamed for things? Is that my motivation? Is my fear? If I do these things, will I receive this praise? So am I setting up unfair expectations? So the next pair is fame and disgrace. So fame and disgrace. How many people here have had great mm, respect for maybe athletic people, great sports stars, or maybe they were great political leaders, or maybe they were great professional people, doctors or lawyers, or politicians or whatever, and you gave them great fame. They earned this fame by doing good deeds, maybe helping many people for many years, doing good things and so on, and you have great respect for them. Maybe it was you. Maybe you were doing great things, and people were really happy about you, and they gave you a lot of respect. And when you went to places, to restaurants or something, people would know your name, and they would save a really good table for you. And so this fame was something really to be feeling wonderful about. You had a great deal of pride in this fame, or other people had this pride, or you had pride in the fame that you were bestowing upon your heroes. But then something happens, and it's discovered that these people who have great fame were doing terrible things. That there was something, the skeleton in the closet, so to speak, that they had embezzled money, or maybe they had bad sexual misdeeds, that they had taken advantage of people in one way or another, that they had made great lies, and so on. So now these people who had great fame and were worthy of all this respect that they were getting, now all of a sudden become disgraced, and you want them to just go away. You want them to be maybe punished, or at the very least just to be able to disappear from the public view, so that you don't have to see this disgrace, because it reminds us of the foibles of human beings, that we all have these things, and there's probably things in our own lives where there's things that we would not like to be remembered for, things that we did when we were, much younger, when we were unaware of our responsibility in society and our families and so on, and we may have done very bad things. So we don't want to see those things, but yet, how much time do we spend thinking about these things? I know sometimes in meditation we can sit down and have a meditation, and before too long, all of a sudden something that happened 20 or 30 years ago that you haven't thought about rises up in your mind. And you say, oh my goodness, I forgot all about that. And what a terrible person I was. And then how does that thought keep churning around in your mind, and it keeps coming back to you, and you say, well, is this thought going to come back to me in times when I need to purify myself? This thought won't go away. How do I deal with this? So the subtleties of these eight worldly concerns can affect the work that we're doing to purify ourselves. So these eight worldly concerns are are dualities, as part of our dualistic nature that we are consumed with. And these are things, identifying these are things that we need to be able to overcome. So we begin to do that by recognizing that um, that these worldly activities, they are lies. That these eight worldly dharmas are like a painted rainbow. Do you think you can put your trust in them? What does that mean, that they are lies? We know that these things happen. We know that these things consume a lot of energy and so on. But the important issue here is that these things, I'm going to turn this off for a second. I want to see everybody and have you, is that all this is part of phenomenal nature. All this is happening within our mind. All these dualities are part of what it is to be a human being. That this is the way we think in those dualities, in those dual natures like that. And you can think about all those different things and begin to categorize them into those four pairs and see how much of what you think about, that's what it is. That's what we think about as ordinary beings. What we think about, all this is like a painted rainbow. All this is like saying, oh, the pie in the sky. There's the rainbow up there. I want that rainbow. I want that rainbow in my life. I want the rainbow body. But this is an imaginary illusion that we've created for ourselves. Just as if we were able to reach up into the sky to that rainbow and put our hand up and try and grab that rainbow, we find that it's just an illusion. It's just something that it's a dynamic of the atmosphere. When the water molecules in there, when the light hits it in a certain way, this rainbow appears. So these eight worldly concerns are like that too. In certain conditions, they appear, but those conditions are all temporary. And if we start thinking that the temporary is permanent, then we get all bound up in being able to, and not being able to see that there is joy, that there is happiness, that there is a liberated life beyond what it is that we're experiencing. So we need to be able to understand that we live in this life of what we call emptiness, that this phenomenal nature is empty of its own true nature. That this emptiness, this nature that we live in, is all contrived. It's all contrived in our minds. We happen to agree that all these things are existing now, and they are existing now in temporary time. But in the absolute way of being able to view things that we can experience through our meditation, we can see that these things are just like a bubble that is just passing through our awareness. And that if we hold on to this bubble, we're holding on to things that are temporary, things that are just bringing us confusion, things that are bringing us suffering. So we need to be able to let go of these things. The same thing with happiness. That happiness is a temporary thing that is going through, and many conditions come together to create this happiness, but it is just phenomenal in its nature. It is empty in its nature. It is part of being a human being, that we conceive of these things, that we fabricate these things. In some ways, you know, we can look at some animals and say, well, these animals, they seem to have this peaceable life. You know, they don't worry about these things. They don't care about what's permanent, what's impermanent. And that's true. But they do have other things that you know, they're easily enslaved, and they go through suffering of not being able to take care of themselves. There's a lot of things that they have suffering about. But human beings are unique in that they create these illusions for themselves that animals do not do. So we need to recognize that this is all fabricated. This is our intellectual mind that is creating these illusions like rainbows. And so the gain and loss, the pleasure and pain, the fame and disgrace, and the praise and blame, these are all just intellectual games that we set ourselves up for. And we continue to play these games, or we can liberate ourselves from these by saying, I can compartmentalize. These things work when I'm at work. These things work with my family and so on. And I have to be able to recognize what the causes of my ego is, why I'm trying to develop these games, and how I can alleviate these games by looking at bodhicitta, by recognizing loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, and have that for myself and have that for other beings, and saying, why am I going and trying to create all this antagonistic suffering for myself with other people? Why can't I just let it go and just relax and just enjoy everything that I can? So this is part of the dynamic of how it is that we are changing, why it is we're changing. This is this impermanence is showing that all this is fabricated. Our life is fabricated. So we need to take responsibility for that. I'm going to go back to this prayer now. Sorry, got to get to the right one. Come on. Try it again. There we go. Okay. So we're on the right one, right? We're on impermanence. So it says, so these 8 worldly dharmas, these 8 worldly concerns, these 8 worldly paths are like a painted rainbow. We create these things for ourselves. Do we think that we can put our trust in them as being the essence of reality, the essence of truth, the essence of who we really are, of what it is to be a complete human being, not just a partial human being who is only thinking about the physical and the intellectual? So now we say, in the certainty of death, and knowing that nothing remains long, quickly accomplish liberation. So in being able to see that there is this temporary nature that we have, this impermanent temporary nature, this emptiness of a true nature, that there is this death that comes, our physical body dies, and with that physical body dying, all our memory dies, all our intellect dies, all that goes along with this. All this, nothing remains long. So we need to be able to recognize, well, what is liberation from this suffering? When we die, what are we liberating from? And where is it that we want to go? What is it that continues? So if what is dying is this physical and this intellectual, then what is living? What happens with the liberation? So this living is that continuum, is that spiritual body that we've talked about many times. So this spiritual body, we eject that from our awareness, from our consciousness. So when we pass, we have this energy. We have this energy that we say that from the moment that we were conceived, came together with the sperm and the egg of our mothers and fathers, came together, and then here comes our spirituality. And then this is growing, growing, growing. We become born, we become a human being, and so on. And then when we die, now what happens? Well, that energy is in our body, and it's going through this center channel. And you've heard that we have reference to the center channel, this energy that is going parallel to our spine. But this is very thin, and it's just like we have these chakras that are going around at these juncture points that are going to our different parts of our body, and this energy is going around through this. This is spiritual energy. It's not the physical energy, it's the spiritual energy. So when we die, we are clinically said that we are dead when our outer breath goes away. And the medical professional declares us as being dead. But there is this inner breath. There is this inner energy that is still with us that has to be ejected from this body. So we learn that we need to be able to control that. We need to be able to learn that it is there and to be able to recognize what it is, to be able to, at the time of our physical death, to be able to eject that through the top of our head. So we have many practices in which we learn how to do this, and our meditations are actually all rehearsals for doing that. So what are we ejecting to? What is that liberation of this spiritual body that we have within ourselves, the spiritual energy? So this is going into what we call reality. What we experience now in this living life here is, we could say, is like one half of that reality. And we think it is everything. But there is another side to this. And the other side is what we eject this to. And so these different practices that we learn of the spiritual body is being able to eject that energy, that spiritual energy, into that spiritual body, so that it then becomes free from all these confusions, from these dharmas and so on. So this is what we need to do. Just one second. Oh, sorry. I don't want to lose my place. So we're talking about this death. So when we do this, so what is permanent? What is the nature of permanence? So for us as human beings, we can only experience that through our meditation, because everything that we experience through the physical body and the intellect is all impermanent. And we say that that is the emptiness. It's empty of its own true nature. But through our meditation, we realize that reality that I was speaking about. So we need to be able to experience that over and over again, in order that we can move towards that permanence of our true nature. So we'll come back to this. The next line says, impermanence makes departure like the shadow of the setting sun. So this is another way of saying that everything is temporary, that it is going to come, that it is going to change, that we are going to experience death, that we are going to go through those changes. Abandoning laziness and indifference, blaze like fire in fierce diligence. So we can, but we shouldn't just be ignorant and just be saying, oh, I just have this life. I have this intellectual life. I have this body. I'm going to enjoy that. And I don't need to pay attention to my spirituality when I'm learning that there is this spirituality. There's many people who are teaching about this spirituality. I need to be able to investigate what this is and learn what this is. We need to be able to seize the opportunities to be able to follow that and not be lazy about it, or to be indifferent about it and say, well, it doesn't matter. I'm going to be ambivalent about it. I don't know whether it exists or not. I'm not going to pay any attention to it. Instead, we need to be like a fire in fierce diligence, that we need to be able to engage with the spirituality the same way that we engage with our physical body and the same way that we engage with our intellectual body. If we do that, we're going to have a greater benefit of being a complete human being. So not just being a partial human being. So this life is impermanent. If we recognize the impermanence, like clouds in the autumn sky, birth and death migrators are the same as actors in a play or performance, or a play or a dance. So if we see ourselves as just being, these migrators that are moving through this play, this stage, this dance that we're going through, and sometimes we have these remembrances that are called déjà vu. Have you ever had an experience like that where things seem to be so familiar to you? And maybe in a past life or something, people will write books about these things, about these kinds of occurrences. But the thing is that there is this energy, there is this vibration that we are all part of, and that we, at certain times, things come together and there's a recognition, there's a harmony that comes together, and we see things, we experience things. Maybe names have changed, faces have changed, places have changed, but it's part of this human condition that is going through our lifetime. And when we recognize that, we say that these birth and death migrators are the same like actors in a play or a performance. So sometimes we might feel ourselves like acting in a play. Oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. At this particular juncture, this is the way I'm supposed to behave. This is the script that I'm supposed to follow. So we need to recognize that we can be able to use that as a means to be able to move ourselves forward and not be caught into some kind of a predisposed, predetermined style of life and behavior. There's an analogy that if a painter, he has a blank piece of paper or a blank canvas, and he has to begin to make marks on there. Maybe he's using paint, or maybe he's using crayons or pencils or chalk or whatever, and they begin to do something on the canvas. And they're building up and putting color on it and everything, but maybe they make a mistake. How do they fix that mistake? Is it once it's on the canvas, does it have to be that way? Or can the artist figure out a way to be able to conceal that mistake, or it becomes now a new part of the image that the artist is trying to create for himself and for other people. And a dancer may have a prescribed choreography that they are following every time, that they have this step that they do, and then that step follows this step, and they remain in perfect balance at every movement that they do. But then while they're doing this, all of a sudden, for some reason, they lose balance. And now their leg goes out in a different way than it did before. And they're about to fall, but now their other leg has to react to keep them from falling. And so to create a new balance for themselves. So does that dancer, does that person, do they integrate that into their choreography to now make a new dance step, that it becomes part of something new, and not just saying, "Oh, I can't do that anymore because my choreography said I had to be strict, I had to do it this way"? Or do we find a way to leave room for new things? Does the artist do that with his painting? Does the dancer do it with their dance step? So through mistakes, we can learn, we can change, we can do things that haven't been done before. So this is a way that we are moving through life as a migrator and not being held back from being able to change ourselves. So this is part of impermanence, permanence, of being able to say, oh, this way that I've been taught to do this is impermanent. It's destined to fail at some time. It's destined to die. How is it going to die? It's going to die with a new invention. It's going to divide. It's going to continue with a new life, and the new life is going to be built upon that which came before, but now it's going to have some new dynamics of its own. So we move in those directions. We see that as a healthy way in which to move, that we're not struck by impermanence and frozen by impermanence. It says, the life of beings is like lightning in the sky. In other words, that lightning comes and bam, how long does it last? But a second, 2 seconds, and it's gone. So this life of ours as a human being is like that. What do we have? 60, 70, 80 years in terms of what has been billions of years. So the human experience is what, only 1 million years or something, and compared to billions of years of what the rest of this phenomenal nature is said to be, and so on. So we have to look at this as all this temporary impermanence that is happening. So we need to be able to become familiar with that and comfortable with that, and not be fearful of that. So death can descend anytime like a drop of morning dew on a blade of grass. I'm going to put this screen share back up. No, now I got this. Oh, here we go. So it says, birth and death migrators are the same as actors in a play or dance. The life of beings is like lightning in the sky. Like water falling from a steep mountain cliff, it departs quickly, quickly. So we have to realize that we have this short period of time, and we need to seize it for its highest potential, for its highest ability. What is the highest ability? Is it to be the the best parent that we can be? Is it to be the worst parent that we can be? Is it to be the best doctor that we can be? Is it to be the worst doctor that we can be? Whatever profession, to be a carpenter, whatever it is. We have this time here, and it's going away quickly, quickly. We can't stop it. So we need to be able to recognize that we have to seize the opportunity that we have in this precious human life. So this next stanza says, the nature of all phenomena is impermanence. The nature of all phenomena is impermanence. That's the nature of this phenomenal nature. Death is a certainty to all who are born. Death can descend any time like a drop of morning dew on a blade of grass. Quick, it is time to make effort for the essence of the Dharma. So this is our choice. Our choice is, do we just live in this non-connected society, this non-connected way of living, just enjoying our physical body, enjoying our intellect, and dealing with all the vicissitudes, all the changes that are happening around us, but being blind to what it is that we have created to manifest all these changes? Or are we going to engage in this spiritual body, which shows us, reveals to us the equality of all this nature, this true nature that we are part of, and to be able to abide now in this enlightened balance of being a complete human being? So this impermanence is the method by which we are learning that there is this imperative to do this quickly, to do this now. We may not get another chance to do this. We have this chance now. We have to seize it. Does this make sense? I know that was a very long way to be able to explain this, but does this make sense? That was Emanuela was giving me a thumbs up. Okay, good. Does anybody else have a comment about this? Or a question? Does it seem clear? Have you recognized this before?
I know for me, a lot of times the way it looks and like, and for me, like when I start suffering a lot or like get depressed, there's like some kind of like blessing in it sometimes too, because I start to see things more clearly. And then when things are going well, it's like when they talk about like the lies of it, to me that means it's almost like there's this implicit thing when I'm going through my life and like, okay, I'm going to do well at this thing, and it's like almost like this frantic effort or this belief, like I'm going to, I'm not thinking about that I'm going to be able to create things in the world and like manipulate my life in a way that then everything's going to be okay.
It's going to
Like then I'm going to feel
stabilize
okay.
everything. It's going to stabilize everything.
Yeah, yeah, and then I'll be happy. But then that thing starts to fall apart, and then there's the next thing, and then I'm accomplished something, and that feels really good, and it's very, you just get caught in this cycle, and it's intoxicating, I think, too. It's almost like like with like addiction because it does work for short periods of time where you get like this like good feeling, or then things, oh, I did these things, and then the relationship is okay, and then the other things, and I accomplished something. It's like, oh, I do feel okay, I do feel good enough, I do feel whatever for like. Then that passes, and it's just like this whole thing, and then when I start to get more down depressed, I realize like none of this is going to work out. Like this whole strategy is just not going to work. Like I don't know. That's this one really hits me a lot. The impermanence one like resonates with me. It's something I've been thinking a lot about.
Sure. Has anybody ever gone to a funeral or heard of a death, of a friend or uh, a family member, or maybe just something that you saw on television or read about or heard about or something like that? But it gave you cause to stop and think about your own mortality. You know, so we have an attachment to this life. We want it to be stable. What Matt was just saying, is what we're thinking about. We want those eight worldly concerns to be stable in our lives. We want to be able to control them. But the reality is that we can't. What we need to do is to be able to liberate ourselves from the attachment to this life. You know, are we prepared to do that? Do we want to do that? Do we want to have another human life? If somebody said to you, "Oh wow, you're doing such a good job and everything, we're going to give you another life after this one," would you prefer that, or would you say, "Well, just roll the dice and let's see what happens"? Or do you want to be able to direct, what happens in the next life? Do you feel that maybe this life that you have now is the result of a past life or past lives that has brought you to this point now, and that now you have a responsibility to do something with this life now? And what is it that we want to do?
Lance?
Yes, sir.
The understanding or that I believe I've gotten from the few years of study with you is that another life is not another chance. It's a continuum.
It's a what?
Continuum.
A continuum.
A continuum. And it's related, certainly related to the life that we have lived and or the lives that we have lived. But it's a continuum, and it's related to what we've done with the lives we've lived. It's not as if, okay, we're going to try this again. It's a building. It's the path. It's the path. That's what I've understood from the teaching and from reading the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, which is not something you just read. It's like the Bible. It's something you read over and over. So that's my understanding of what another life would be, and I believe that. But I don't believe it. I don't look at it as another chance. I look at it as a direction.
Yes, I think that's healthy.
I was gonna say, yeah, I think there's a lot in my life that I can't account just in this one. So I've always wondered, but
In terms of what? Good things or bad things?
good, I guess. Like skills that I have, or sometimes I'll say things that I'm like, I don't know where that came from. I've never heard that before, things like that or something. If that makes sense.
Well, what sense do you make of that? Where does that come from? Your physical body? Does it come from your intellect, or do you think it comes from something that is spiritual?
Yeah, I think it's spiritual. And especially, yeah, when I ditch the body and the intellect, that's when it usually comes out too. So but yeah, I've thought about that a lot, and yeah, the rebirth would make sense, like it came from before or something. But yeah, I've always thought about that.
Do you recall how old you were? Maybe the first time that you can remember that happening?
I think I was three or four. Yeah. I've always felt really adult, and yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. I totally understand. Yeah, I was about 3 years old. I remember feeling that there was this connection point, and as it says in one of the prayers, it struck a fear inside of me, or a wonder inside of me. What is this? What am I? What am I? Where am I? What's going to go? What's going to happen now?
Yeah, it's a little scary sometimes. Yeah.
It's scary, yeah.
But yeah, just try to go with it. Like, I guess I'm really good at math, and sometimes, yeah, I'm like, I don't know where this came from. I've never learned it, but yeah, it's interesting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Gavin, and I saw you had your microphone turned on. Did you want to say something, or was it Karina wanted to say something?
Yeah, I want to talk about the line that says life and death migrators. And
Yes.
humans don't know how to migrate. So I'm really trying to get my mind wrapped around how the word is utilized. Does it mean that, like, the spirit after death goes off planet and then migrates back to planet? Or is it meaning that there's like secret esoteric death mystery knowledge where a group of people could die and then migrate right back into continuing what they were doing as a family? Like, let's say the royal family, or any royal families, and they've figured out how to reincarnate after they die. Maybe the Queen of England that just passed is going to be a new baby, and she's migrated back into the family. Whereas the humans that don't learn of the death migratory process as they're in their form now, they just randomly are tossing the dice. What does this word death and life migrators really mean? Because it opens up a large misunderstanding for me to, back to that question, like, did Buddha have a child? Yes. Was Buddha migrating and to a permanent place in nirvana? Or many people say if you have a child, you have to reincarnate back into samsara. So it goes back to this life and death migrators, and whether or not Buddha had the life and death mystery knowledge to migrate to nirvana even after having a child. These are all, so I don't know where the answer
Well,
to
it's
that
an
is.
interesting question. And so I think an extension of that question is there a genetic migration? Or is there a spiritual migration? Because we
Right.
talked to, they talk about that the egg and the sperm of the father come together and genetically is forming this other creature, if you will. But then there is this animation of the spirit that comes in too. So is one the genetic migration and all the possibilities that can happen, and then this spiritual migration that comes in, where all of a sudden you have this being who has nothing to do with the genetics in terms of the family makeup, what they look like and everything, but here comes this spiritual being who looks like the rest of the family but behaves totally different, has a whole different way of looking at life and like that. So this is part of what we're going to explore in the Sundays that we start. Actually, we start this Sunday when we're talking about the 6 human realms in the way that human beings manifest, why they manifest, how they manifest, what it is that they manifest as, and so on, and try and look at those questions and how to be able to experience that, to remember that from a experiential point of view. So we need to give a toolbox of what to look at, and then it's up to us individually to be able to work with that. But to answer your question, yes, do we have this spiritual nomadism, this migration? Are we migrating through all these different forms of being a sentient being? Have we been animals before? Have we been insects before? Have we been inanimate objects before? What we call inanimate, but meanwhile, they could be the repositories of life for some period of time, and in some shift of energy that we as human beings haven't discovered yet, it's released, and then they're born again as another entity in some way or another. So to be able to look at that and understand it, that there is this transpersonal experience that we have. There's a question about the Buddha says he saw all his lives, and he saw all the lives of other beings in the past, in the present, and in the future. Now, how literal can we take that? Or can we take it that there is this human experience that we all share? in the past and the present and the future, when they all just become one time. And that we just see in certain circumstances, this is what it is to be a human being. And yes, I have empathy for that. Yes, I can understand that, because I can focus my attention on that and what that must be like to live in that. So some beings will manifest completely in that, like a migrator, but can we do that spiritually through our meditation?
And Lance, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if this is useful or not, but in my experience, just with like reading a bunch of Buddhist texts and stuff, when they use that like term, the migrator, like birth and death migrators, that isn't it just basically referring to like sentient beings as like birth and death migrators, just in the sense that they're migrating from, or they're going from life to life in the stream, and as opposed to like a Buddha who's off that cycle? Isn't that like what the term there is referring to? Or maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, in an outer way, yes.
In an outer way,
I mean,
right?
Yeah, in an outer way, that means that yes, we're going from one lifetime to another lifetime. Yes,
Right.
But then I was trying to look at it a little bit from the inner point of view.
Right. Yeah, no,
Of saying that that there is this continuum that we're all part of, and that we can plug ourselves in anywhere in that continuum that we want to through our mindfulness practices.
Yeah, and like the tulkus and everything, and the do it into.
I recently came across a physicist who theorized what the transition into death from his perspective is. And he says the transition from death, from life, is going from one state of geometry to another state. So the geometric shapes, like the human body, they incorporate the Fibonacci sequence, but static geometry like pyramids and cubes do not incorporate the Fibonacci sequence. So the Fibonacci, like a shell, spirals.
The spiral shells.
And the shell stops at a certain point, and that would be the life and death of the life of the shell. But incorporated that into a human life, and how that human body will end, and some sort of spirit transitions from the geometrical state of the human form into, say, an orb. People usually proclaim they see ghosts as orbs or energy balls. And so then that comes up with the idea that there's 5 Platonic solid static shapes. And then that would bring back into this idea of migratory knowledge in between life and death realms, and whether or not one has, while they were living, learned how to turn into the precise shape they would need to post-mortem to migrate back into, once again, say, the royal family. The Queen Victoria, she wants to be the queen that just passed, or maybe, so that's interesting about the geometrical shapes that incorporate Fibonacci and phi, and then maybe life is a transition to one of the 5 Platonic solid states of static geometric functionality of the universe. I don't know.
How many dimensions you think there are?
Endless.
Okay. But I think that's part of the question. We see things in 3 dimensions, and everything that we experience is with our mind. Our intellectual mind is allowing us to have this conversation, but we're trying to explain something that can be experienced through our heart mind that has a whole different dimension to it, or dimensions to it. And once we expose ourselves to that, once we open ourselves up to that, we open up the heart mind, then the frailty, the puniness of this intellectual mind becomes obvious to us. And say, okay, we can talk about these things, but it becomes more of just an exercise of trying to entice others to enjoy this. It becomes an invitation to enjoy this, that there's much more than just these three dimensions that as human beings we can experience. And do we indeed, when we leave this body, do we then become a feature of those other dimensions? And are those dimensions among us right now, but we don't recognize them? We don't have the tools, the ability, our organs don't recognize those things, but they're here already.
True, true.
So these are very provocative questions and thoughts, aren't they?
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Think about it all the time.
Yeah. You know, so what success have you had? I'm going to ask this question. What success have you had in being able to answer those questions?
Just speculative thought about, well, sure, if the thought exists, maybe deja vu is from a future life that hasn't been perceived in the physical now. And many humans think it's from a past life, but if all lives and all time were perceived by Buddha, then perhaps it's all one giant circle. And deja vu could be from a future entanglement that we have no precognition of that in this now. But,
so maybe you've used some kind of a system, an organized system in which you've used to do that analysis. And if you haven't had that, imagine what it would be like if you did have that kind of a system to be able to analyze that, and what success you might have at that process.
True.
So that's really what we're trying to do, is to give ourselves a system by which we can analyze all this, to be able to experience this for ourselves. You know, to what degree we want to get in and play these intellectual games with this, that's up to us for many different reasons, you know, but we could just relax and say, oh, man, I'm liberated. All I got to do is just sit out in the sun and relax. You know, all I got to do is just be happy, be satisfied. How do I do that? So the system can work for us in many different levels, many different ways, and we become in control of that. You know, not everybody wants to be the scientist, the spiritual scientist. You know, we don't have to be the spiritual scientist. But at the same time, we have to have an appreciation for the liberation, for the enlightenment, for the awareness that it brings, and the responsibility that we have as human beings to be able to be the holder of that. There's in the Buddhist philosophy, there's a particular level that is called the hero awareness holder. The hero awareness holder. So it's sort of in the middle. But here is a being, a spiritual being, who to many is a hero because they're looking up to them and their courageous way in which they have gotten to where they are. They're a hero awareness that they are liberated to the point of enlightenment, that they are aware of all the phenomenal nature, as well as the essence of the phenomenal nature as being temporary, but then also beyond, or what we might call beyond that phenomenal nature, that emptiness nature, to be able to recognize the absolute nature. You know, that's speaking in dualism, but the space. Is there a consciousness of space? And then to be able to hold that, to be able to have that in their midst. Are there human beings like that? Or is that a spiritual being who has no body? has no intellect as we would think of as an intellect. So that's expressed in the Buddhist philosophy. It may be expressed in other philosophies as well. I'm not that much of a scholar to know for sure, but nevertheless, it's a fascinating point of mindfulness.
If the earth is conscious, is the earth conscious of the space that it holds?
Well, to me, that's an intellectual game. You know, because to be able to liberate ourselves from our human body, our human mind, would potentially give us the answer to that or allow us to have the answer to that. But as long as we're looking at that through our limited human mind, we're going to hit the wall. We're going to, you know, there's no way to be able to express that. There's no way to be able to experience that as an ordinary human being. We have to transcend the human mind. And that's the liberation. So, you know, I mean, what does that mean to you? Feza, what does that mean to you? I mean, is that a mind blower for you, or does that come easily to you?
I'm not quite sure what to think. I mean, in most conversations like this, I just kind of stand aside and listen, because I think with my mind stream, I do have a lot of questions and a lot of them can't be answered, and I accept that. But you know, listening to the concepts that you and Gavin were talking about, it just kind of, sometimes it frustrates me because I don't have the creativity to absorb those questions to the extent that you guys can. So I try to find different ways to contemplate, and I sometimes I get stuck. So I'm just kind of settling in and listening to it all with an open mind. You know.
Does it seem to matter to you?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. You know, all of it matters to me. I mean, I don't know. My spiritual state is very much stuck. Like, I'm very conscious about the concept of impermanence and different dimensions and all sorts of things. But sometimes I get really frustrated with all of the intellectual concepts that come with Buddhism and all the different levels that you can reach. So my ultimate goal is to just treat people with kindness, because I figure that's the best karma I can give myself.
Well, you're correct. That is the answer right there, is the bodhicitta, the holy enlightened mind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as a human being, you know, that is what we are trying to cultivate and develop, and that becomes our mode of being able to engage with this, to engage spiritually with other beings, to engage with ourselves and so on, is through bodhicitta. You know, these mind games of trying to identify all these things and everything is temporary. But the holy enlightened mind doesn't care about those things. It's only focused on, or it's only involved with this. It's only an expression of this. So to understand that loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, that's the key. That is the essence of what this is. That is the true nature. So
It's refreshing.
What's that?
I said that's refreshing.
Yes. So you're dialed in. You know, you got the radio station. You know, I've used the analogy before. You know, when I was a kid, we used to listen to AM radio. That was the only, you know, before FM. and the AM radio, if you're in your car or whatever, you're moving, and it would kind of drift, and you'd kind, every hour you'd have to go and adjust the channel a little bit, and so this is an analogy for us tuning in to our bodhicitta. It needs to be tweaked every now and then. We need to adjust it a little bit. So the static is all this stuff around it, all this noise of the intellect, is the static. It's not the station that we want.
Lance, these young folks don't remember when the FM didn't exist.
Maybe that's not a good analogy anymore.
You got through to me, but I may be the only one who
We may wind ourselves back up in that situation.
No, I remember back in Russia, we were tuning on this Voice of America.
Oh, yeah.
Catching all those waves, trying to avoid the suppression noise.
Yes.
It was before perestroika. But I just want to add to this discussion. Sometimes my friends or I myself wonder about this multi-dimensional universe. And I don't know, my own approach to this, okay, even if physicists talk about 10 dimensions, well, these dimensions come at an energies of million times more than hadron collider can generate. So who cares? I mean, I just have hard times, challenged by 4 dimensions of space and time. And I mean, maybe there is another dimension, we explore today, another reality. Yeah, that's, I think, if in somebody's dream you get lost in some dimensions and you need to figure out how to get back, I guess then it's really good to start thinking about it seriously. But everything is cool, and 3 dimensions don't get you confused. Let's pay attention to what's here and now, and who is around us. That's my 2 cents.
No, that's very good. I think that's right. Do you think that we, by being exposed to these ideas, these concepts, whatever you want to call them, these levels, whatever, do you think that they help us to appreciate the liberation, or does it just confuse the liberation? Does it block it up?
I think it, in terms of expanding your mind, sometimes to be able to jump over high pole, right, high plank, we need to start jumping over a low plank that is lower than our own height. So I think to the degree that it helps us to advance, to expand our mind, expand our potential to understand what's here, what's around, what's happening with us. Always great to study more math and physics. And then it helped me to deal with many of these very confusing, sometimes spiritual theories or concepts, So I think, I have, background in physics, chemistry, math, whatever, I having flexible mind in that way, just like doing yoga, you can do this and do that, but eventually why it's helpful to overcome obstacles in your life. So.
Okay. Does anybody else have any comments about this? Because this is a good discussion, and speak up, please. Yes, Kate.
Yes. Well, the Buddha, according to what I've learned, taught thousands of different approaches to liberation suited to our different temperaments, our different backgrounds. So for some people, I think a very intellectual approach may be well suited. And for others of us, maybe not so much. And to tie into another lesson I've learned, at some point, I think we need a spiritual teacher, somebody in this life who knows us, understands what we're like, and can point us to the teachings that will benefit us the most. You know, as long as we're trying to do this entirely on our own, sooner or later, we get bogged down and we get caught in the weeds. But a spiritual teacher can help point us to the way that will get us through.
Very well said, yes. And that actually is chapter 2 of the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. So yes, having a teacher. So here we're looking at all these potentials, you know, but at the same time, to have someone who can guide us, give us advice, whatever, and when we get kind of lost in the weeds, like you just said, can nudge us back in the direction of where we need to be, is really great. But we need to be able to invite that person into our experience. You know, the teacher's normally not going to just manifest, and if that teacher does manifest, we're likely not to recognize them because we don't know what it is that we're looking for at that point. So this conversation is really meant to open us up to why it is that we're looking at the Dharma in the first place. You know, we're looking at it because we're in wonder that we have this human life, and especially this precious human life, and we're looking at this in wonderment and trying to understand impermanence, and by way of that, permanence. What is it permanent? Is it impermanence? What does that mean? And then when we die or we see somebody dying, then it brings it to question, because then emotions come up, because fear comes up. Do I know what this life is? Did I waste this life? And so on. So having a teacher is a very important part of this whole process.
Yeah, I think I agree with Kate's point too. It's a good point, and it's in me with what you were saying, Faiza, as well, and like that you felt I don't exactly say, but it kind of like felt bad that like, you weren't thinking about things in this way, and more just like with the impermanence and stuff. And I can tell you, I've been involved in different ways, like in Buddhism for a little while, and I very much wish I had your approach, as opposed to over those years, in all seriousness, as opposed to like the approach that I had, which is much more of this intellectualization. And, you know, I'm sitting there, I'm all living the 8 worldly dharmas 24/7, but I'm sitting there reading like Nargajuna, and then I'm like looking into, you know, trying myself to interpret quantum mechanics somehow, and then I'm looking at the nature of consciousness and the different theories, and then the research on this and all of these things, where then at the end of the day, years pass, and I'm not really changed. And that's kind of why I'm trying to start over now. So I don't know. Whatever.
Well, I think we've all been there, you know, or, you know, anybody, you know, that's what we do. We go through this process to exhaust it. And finally we get to the point and say, oh my goodness. And then you just relax. And that's when the meditation comes. That's when the transcendence comes. Because you're not trying to fit it into all these holes and so on, into all these cabinets, into all these compartments. It just is. And you recognize it for what it is, you know. And there's an expression called the suchness of the mind, or the thatness of phenomena. And we just recognize, well, this is what it is. And we don't have to make more out of it than what it really is. We just need to relax in it and be a natural human being. So that's what we're trying to recognize. Where is our natural, where is our balance line? And how can I contribute to society with that? So this is where the Eightfold Path comes into play. How do we evaluate where I need to be amongst all this? Because what we're trying to do, if we go back to the four thoughts, or excuse me, to the Four Noble Truths, if you remember, the first one was all life has suffering. The second was the suffering is desire, grasping to have this life and all the emotions that are involved there. The third one was the cessation, the renunciation of this suffering. And then the fourth one was, how do we do that? We do that through the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is how we begin to live an enlightened life in this life. We don't have to wait for another lifetime. We can do it now. That was the meaning of the life of the great Bodhisattva, the great Buddha who became Buddha, Milarepa, the great yogi, who did terrible things during his life, wasted time, killed people, did lots of things, but meanwhile was able to correct himself and be able to lead an enlightened life after that. And that becomes an example for us all.
On the topic of is it helpful or is it not? It almost seems like everything can be both. Like the way I describe it is, or this quote, if guns killed people, do pens misspell words? It just seems like everything's a tool and it's all in your hands. Like, what are you going to do with it? Like, even too much of a good thing can hurt at a certain point, you know? It's like,
well, that's correct.
Yeah.
So we've got to understand our boundaries, you know, but realizing that we create those boundaries, you know, for safety's sake, for different reasons, but ultimately we need no boundaries.
And then those boundaries seem to vary all the time too.
Well, it's relative, because that's the phenomenal nature is the relative temporary nature. You know, and being able to understand, to experience that, not to just say it, but to experience the relative nature. And that comes from contemplation that brings meditation, to be able to look and see that, to get to the space, to be able to see that which is taking up space.
I really like how they use so many natural phenomena like the rainbow, the shadow, the falling water. Yeah, it's everything's changing and relative. Yeah, it seems.
Well, this is the genius of the Buddha, you know, and when we say the Buddha, I'm not strictly referring to Shakyamuni Buddha. Shakyamuni Buddha was the founder of this, who discovered this, gave us the gift of the Dharma. But since then, have been many other Buddhas who have come and who have expounded on the teachings of the Buddha. So, it's all part of the same philosophy, if you will. And that we have that within ourselves. And if you're a creative person who likes to write, who likes to draw, who likes to make music, you know, so many different ways in being able to express our spirituality. And, you know, I invite everybody to experiment and find ways in which they can express themselves. And don't be worried if you're wrong, you know, because we're all wrong half the time, you know, and that's fine. But to be able to see yourself growing is part of this process. It helps you to keep from repeating the same mistakes over and over again. Say, oh, I did that before. I can recognize that. So it's organizing ourselves. It's controlling our mind. Our mind is a monkey mind. It's going off in many directions and it repeats itself all the time. So if we can use these tools to control ourselves, then that's what we want to be. Does that make sense? Brendan, what do you think?
Well, Lance, I was thinking about the question you asked a while ago. Do we want to be reborn into a human body or something else? And I was going to talk about samsara and how much samsara I've been experiencing. And I was going to say, I don't want that human body. Just get me out of this, this mess. But no, on a more positive note, I'll try to be more positive tonight and not focus so much on samsara. And I'll focus on what Gavin was saying, which to me and Alex, which is just fascinating. I have envy of physicists because they understand math, which is the language of physics, and I love reading about where Buddhism and quantum physics and other physics intersect. And I was reading something, it was from one of the sutras where the Buddha seems to be talking about black holes. It's the Darkness and Akra Sutra. He says there is an intercosmic void and unrestrained darkness, pure pitch black darkness. How the Buddha would know this stuff fascinates me. And to me, that's not an obstacle. That helps me, the fact that Buddha somehow would know this. But what I also admire is that he was willing to say what he doesn't know. And when one of his followers asked about, why is there something rather than nothing? Where does the universe come from? He said, I don't know, and it's not important. And I have a lot of respect for that humility to admit what he doesn't know as well. So that's my 2 cents on what we're talking about tonight.
Very good. Thank you.
Welcome.
Would anybody else like to say anything? So coming up, like I said, on Sunday, we're going to start this, this 5-week study on the 6 human realms. I hope you all are going to be. I think everybody has an invitation to that, and I think you'll find that very, very helpful in being able to understand who we are, what we're doing, and so on. So this is like a Buddhism 201. So it's like an advanced level, and it's going to be part of what we've been learning, and so I hope you take advantage of that. If you can't join as we're doing it on Sunday, it will be recorded and will be available on YouTube. So that'll be good.
Do we use this same link, Lance?
No, we're going to use a different link, and I think you should have gotten it. Did you get the announcement last? I guess it was Thursday or Friday. We sent out an announcement, and we'll send out another one this week to remind everybody. But there's a new link, so it's just for this particular teaching.
Was it in the email or the WhatsApp?
WhatsApp. So if you haven't gotten it, be sure to let me know. And so we're trying to communicate on the WhatsApp platform because it works really well for most of us anyway. And if you need to turn on your notifications so you know when a new message is coming in, would be very helpful. But it's much more efficient than email and so on like that. And we're keeping this as a invitation only, because it is a very focused thing, and there's certain prerequisites, I think, to being able to get the best out of this. And so we're not throwing it open to just random people who are kind of like crashing in and bringing up things that we don't want to follow down those rabbit holes right now.
The link is in WhatsApp.
What's that?
The link is in WhatsApp.
It is, yes. What's it? It's called the six realm study group, something like
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So to wrap this up, so this impermanence is demonstrating that why waste time on the 8 worldly dharmas? To be able to compartmentalize those 8 worldly dharmas. Those 8 worldly dharmas are part of being a human being. You know, we're already, involved with those thoughts. But to be able to compartmentalize them, to say, well, I no longer have to chase those thoughts. I no longer have to make those thoughts everything that I think about. And the conversation that we've had tonight, is that not exposing you to some new adventures, some new ways in which to learn about some new things that are within ourselves, and to read, to study, but most important, to create your practice, to develop a meditation practice, because you can read and study, and it's just vicarious experience. You're reading about somebody else who's trying to explain their experience to you. But the real thing is when you experience it yourself. And the only way that I know that you're going to experience this is through your own practice, through your own meditation. So this is what we're trying to help you do. This is to do that. If we all become meditators, if we all become practitioners, we all become in union with our true nature. We begin to recognize our true nature. And that's where the difference is. All the stuff that's happening around us in phenomenal nature, all the news programs, all the confusions, all the fighting between this group and that group, and all the dynamics of family and all that kind of stuff just gets put aside. It's all just little stuff compared to the big mind, which is just to be free. So the choice is, do you want to be free, or do you like being engaged with all that stuff? So we do it one person at a time. The only person we can change is ourselves. So I hope that makes some sense. So next week we're going to talk. We'll continue the conversation with the faults of samsara, or the suffering of samsara, and the karma, cause and result. So it may be that we need a meeting for each one of those two to be able to get this out. I hope this discussion is helpful for everybody. Okay. So now we should do our dedication. Does anybody else have anything you want to bring up? Okay. So now we go to our dedication prayers. Oops. Oh, there we go. Okay. Dorje Chang, Talopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Dormalor Gampopa, Pagma Drupa, and Lordri Kumpa. Please bestow upon us the most auspicious blessing of all the Kaju Lamas. By this virtue may I achieve the all-knowing state, and may all who travel on the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating all enemies, confusion, the cause of suffering. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind. Where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have long life. I pray that your Dharma activities spread far and wide. I pray that I may not be separated from you. As Manjushri, the warrior, realized the ultimate state, and as did Samantabhadra, I will follow in their path and fully dedicate all merit for all sentient beings. By the blessing of the Buddha, who attained the three kayas, by the blessing of the truth of the unchanging Dharma as such, by the blessing of the indivisible Sangha order, may the merit I share bear fruit. By the virtues collected in the three times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Trikumpa Ratna Shri, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. And there's many great masters. The dedication prayer by Lord Jigdan Sumgun, who is Ratna Shri. Drikungpa Ratna Shri is the founder of this lineage, the Drikungkagyu lineage. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, yogins, yoginis, and dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. By the virtues collected in the three times, by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana, and the innate word of virtue, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Maras and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. I hope you recognize some of the words in there, the references that we say. So you see that these prayers are helping us to remember our teachings. Om, Ah, Hong. Om, Ah, Hong. Om, Ah, Hong. And my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Lance.
Thank you.
Lance.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you, Lance.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Good night, everyone.
Class.
Thank you, Lord, this evening.
Okay. Have a good night, everybody.
Hey, Lance,
Yes,
do you have
dear.
just a moment?
Sure.
So I do have some questions I've been sort of struggling with, and I'm having trouble even articulating about the spiritual teacher. And I wondered if we could schedule a time to talk about it a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. When you want, tomorrow, Wednesday, what's convenient for you?
Tomorrow is fine. Tomorrow morning, could we do it in the morning?
Tomorrow, say around, let me see. I got a 1 o'clock. You want to say 11:30?
Could we do 11? I do have to leave around noon.
Okay, 11 o'clock.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right, great. I'll look forward to it.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Good night.
All right, good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.